Hello.
Good
Hi.
evening. Good evening.
Good
How's
evening.
everybody?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Excellent. My name, just to get this out of the way, my name is Simon. I'm talking to you on behalf of Focusrite, and welcome everybody to this Focusrite webinar that we hope to explore some of the issues that can arise with mental health in and around the music industry. With us, we have SK Shlomo, who, of course, is an accomplished artist, beatboxer and advocate for mental well-being in the industry. And we also have Chula here, who is a BACP registered psychotherapist, who, along with his private practice, also works with the UK-based charity Music Support, supporting those in the music industry experiencing some of the issues that we're almost certainly going to be talking about. How are both of you this evening?
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Very good.
Pretty good.
Very good, absolutely, yes. Strange times, of course, at the moment.
Yes.
Was there anything that either of you wanted to add to my short introduction there?
I'd really like to say a big thank you to Focusrite and Novation for hosting this today. I think it's a really great thing to do. Companies like you don't have to do this, so it's really great that you care about people who use your products and their well-being. So big ups. So thanks for hosting today, and also thanks Chula for
thank you
being on it with us.
Yeah, thank you for asking me, and I'd like to second that as well. I think it's fantastic that this stuff is being supported in the music industry, and that we're giving some exposure to Music Support, who are just an amazing charity helping a lot of people in the music industry, and not just the artists but the crew and the people behind the scenes at the record companies as well.
Absolutely, and of course both of you sort of met, although not in person, when you Shlo, you wrote an article for Novation, didn't you, that sort of outlined some of the things, or rather in depth, talked about some of the things that we're hopefully going to talk about today. And then Chula, you sort of annotated those from a psychotherapist point of view, which was a great insight, I thought, for that article. If anybody's in the Facebook event as well. So without further ado, I suspect that it would be great to get on with your performance, Shlo, if that's okay, if you're ready for that.
Yeah, get myself ready. You're going to give me a massive stadium intro, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, hang on. Let me just get ready.
No worries. And then once Shlo has finished his performance, we'll then drop Chula back in, and hopefully we'll be able to listen to you guys having a bit of a conversation about what Shlo's been talking about. If anybody on the streams or on YouTube or Facebook has any questions, then we will have time at the end for a quick Q&A. So please do drop your questions if you have anything pertinent to either the conversation or something that you've been thinking about. Then please do let us know, and we'll try and fit it in near the end. But Shlo, if you're ready, then I think that we are ready to go. So bear with me one sec. Okay.
I thought you were going to give me a stadium intro.
It's the best I could do, I'm afraid.
I'll do it myself. Ladies and gentlemen, go crazy. He's amazing. It's SK Shlomo. You can tell I'm missing being on tour. Anyway, I'm going to perform an excerpt for you now from a show that I made last year, which is called Surrender. It's a theatre show that I took to the Edinburgh Fringe, and it got shortlisted for the Edinburgh Fringe Mental Health Award. And I suspect the reason why I got that is because of this segment of the show which talks about mental health. So it goes a little bit like this. Last summer, no, 2 summers ago, my whole world transformed. Since the age of 19, I had lived my life in a whirlwind, touring the globe, working with heroes, and living out childhood dreams. But the whole time, I was carrying a secret. I was in dangerous levels of pain. As a young adult growing up in the public eye, I learned the hard way not to share too much of myself to the real world. For example, checking online to see if the public like you immediately after you've performed on primetime TV is a slippery slope, because for every human who loves you for your successes, there are plenty ready to take you down under the veil of online anonymity. But still, I'd find myself hours later, stuck in a loop, desperately scrolling, seeking just one more hit of validation. I ended up isolated, exhausted, and angry with myself. So I withdrew. I shut my true self off. And if I did share, I would filter my persona, only posting pictures of my perfect, happy life, pretending everything was great all of the time. Instead of admitting I wasn't okay, I poured more and more and more of myself into my work. I toured constantly. I ended up playing at massive festivals like Glastonbury, collaborating with people like Bjork and Ed Sheeran and Damon Albarn, and breaking world records in the process. But despite these accolades, I'd always walk away feeling somehow empty. One day, I decided to confront that emptiness, and I did the unthinkable. For the first time in my adult life, I came off tour. I cancelled everything to do what I'd resisted all that time and become a solo recording artist. I decided to make an album of my own. In the first 4 days, I wrote 5 sick tracks. I was like, I'm a freaking genius. But on the 6th day, without the constant distractions of touring, I was left with just myself and my mind. I had no choice but to take a good look inwards. And I did not like what I saw. I felt my whole self drop. It's not just that I couldn't write. It felt like the waters of anxiety were rising above me. Like I was stuck. I didn't feel safe to be seen. Now, I didn't know much about mental health, but after a few weeks of this excruciating pain, I was finally ready to admit that I wasn't okay. First of all to myself, then to my partner, who after lots of loving encouragement and false starts, helped me to speak to a doctor. The doctor referred me for therapy, and in the months that followed, I worked so hard to try and pull myself up and out of the darkness, to try and rebuild something. But this depression had me hiding away for almost an entire year, writing my truth into my songs, isolated by the shame of this secret suffering. And when the day came that it was time to tell the world that I was making an album, I did not know what to do, because these songs were all about my mental health, and none of my fans or my friends or my family even knew that I'd been struggling. But the songs felt good. They came from the heart, and I realized if I was going to make progress with this music, I was going to have to be honest. So I decided it was time to come out of hiding. So I launched a crowdfunding video for the album, with a video talking about my mental health for the first time. Now that was quite scary, but it was empowering. It got met positively, and the total zoomed up to 15%. I was like, this is going to be okay. Now, I had been warned that I would need a thick skin, so I'd been practicing, I'd been refining and simplifying my narrative until I'd found what felt like a safe way to be vulnerable. But nothing could prepare me for what happened next. One day, a few weeks into my campaign, I woke up to a barrage of angry messages from somebody on Twitter, claiming to be a fan, but attacking me about my mental health. He told me I needed to see how low I had stooped. He told me that depression, and specifically suicide, are evolution's way of weeding out inadequate men who aren't fit to reproduce, who aren't fit to be fathers. Now, I know that online abuse affects many people around the world every single day, but this hit me hard. It hit me hard because my mind decided to join in the attack. Like, you are worthless. You are nothing. You disgust me. You are an embarrassment to your family, to your children. You don't deserve to live. Looking back, I know that these feelings are all too common. And these anxieties are only amplified within the artificial walls of social media. It's like the echo chamber for all our insecurities. It's like the noise drowns out all reason. And so I found myself drowning, plunging into terror. Couldn't think straight, couldn't stop these frightening, intrusive thoughts. Couldn't breathe. I wanted to end it. I wanted to end it all. I knew what I needed to do. I wanted to end it. I wanted to end it all. But one thing had changed since my last episode with depression. Since I'd been open about it online, my family and my friends and my fans started reaching out to me. And just as I was getting ready to give up on everything I'd fought for, a well-timed online message just asking if I was okay, it gave me the strength to share what was happening in my head. To share these fantasies of taking my life. And being met with compassion and reassurance, it gave me the strength, it gave me the hope to realize that I didn't have to attack myself or isolate myself if I didn't feel good enough to live. Zooming out, I could see I still had so much left to live for. That online message saved my life because it helped me change my attitude towards myself from helpless victim to empowered human, able to stand up and ask for support. And that's what I did the next day. I went online and I typed the words, guys, I've been attacked about my mental health, but you know what? I'm going to share more of my truth. And I posted this article that I'd been too frightened to share about my struggle with PTSD, post-traumatic stress, how as an adult I'd had to revisit surviving a near-death experience when I was just 4 years old. Now, this kind of online sharing isn't for everybody, and I definitely lost a few followers, but for me, speaking about the trauma helped me reclaim the power that fear had held over me for all this time. And the online reaction was overwhelming. My friends and my family and my fans, they rallied around me, supporting me, sharing this story far and wide, saying, forget the haters. The trolls don't understand. Believe in yourself. Within days, I'd gone from wanting to die to being the subject of a viral survival story. We smashed the crowdfunding target, meaning that I was able to raise a bunch of money and awareness for an incredible mental health charity and make the album that I'd always dreamed of. My world was transforming. And so was the community around me. It turns out that despite the discomfort, most people are really happy to hear what's really happening, and they're relieved to be given an opportunity to express their truths back. People reported to me that they were now getting support with issues they'd previously been too ashamed to share. Some people had even gone to get professional help as a direct result of me telling my story. And as for me, I feel so different now. I feel less isolated. I feel understood. Even when my struggles come back at difficult times like these, I know that if I just be honest about it, there's people around the world online in a different time zone who might be able to help me and support me. Now, I'm not saying we all need to share our deepest, darkest insecurities and broadcast that on the internet. That is not the answer to our suicide epidemic, which, believe me, is happening. But in order for us all to feel safe enough to share our setbacks way before they grow into these shameful, destructive secrets, I invite you to try something. We all need to be more vulnerable. So if, like me, you believe that sharing our weaknesses makes us stronger, I invite you to try something today. Try sharing a truth, big or small. Like, it could be, maybe you lost your cool in a tricky situation. Or maybe you shouted at your kid. Or maybe you ate somebody else's special biscuits. Or maybe there are some mornings when you can't get out of bed at all. Either way, by sharing what's really happening, you might help somebody else speak their truth tomorrow. Who knows? You might save a life. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It always moves me when I watch you do that. It kind of goes straight past my therapist head, and just hits me. You know, I just connect with it on a really human and a very personal level as well, because it reminds me of my journey out of the darkness, as it were. And yeah, it's just beautiful the way you've put it all together, and there's just a couple of bits in there that just really pull on the heartstrings.
Yes.
And it's so powerful, you know, so powerful. Yeah, you can see, you can hear it in your voice and see it in your face. And it's just it's, that truth is amazing, and you do great. You've been doing some great work with it all. It's really impressive.
Thank you, man. Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear you talk about, like, kind of, what did you say, like bypassing your therapist brain straight to your human brain, because I guess, like, you probably hear stories like this a lot, and then you have to sort of obviously stay professional and stay supportive, but, like, you're also human, right? You've talked about your own journey, like your journey into becoming a therapist was you were doing music as well, weren't you? And you were also struggling with addiction.
Yep, I was a musician from a very young age, and got signed in my 20s, and everything was going really well, but then fell into heroin addiction, and that just ruined my whole career, and I spiraled down into depths that, you know, I can't even begin to describe here, but it wasn't great. And then I was fortunate enough to go to a really good rehab, and get into 12-step recovery. And that's kept me safe and sane ever since. That was 2003 when I got clean.
That's a long time, man. And how many people have you helped since then? There must be so many people that your different experiences helped.
Well, just in the first 5 years of being a drug and alcohol practitioner, in statutory services, I must have worked with about 500 people one-on-one. And there's been many more since. Unfortunately, I work in the field, I began in the field of addiction, and the outcomes aren't great. Most people do actually die of their addiction or don't manage to find recovery. I consider myself very lucky to be in recovery, because most people don't find it. But I've branched out now, and I'm working as a psychotherapist, working with all sorts of different issues. And in the music industry, it's been really good to kind of connect those two things for myself. As part of my journey, you know, kind of coming full circle back to be able to help people who benefit from that identification. You know, working with addicts, there's that identification that really helps them. from a therapeutic point of view, but also working with musicians, I have that same kind of element that I can use to create an understanding.
That's so important. Do you know what? 'Cause
Yeah.
I actually went to therapy like 10 years before all this happened, and
Right.
and at that point I was struggling with alcohol addiction, and I was struggling with a bunch of stuff. But I went to go and get help, and I did dry. I have actually been clean and dry since then. So that was like,
Wow.
yeah, 11 years now, nearly 12
Well
years
done.
now. Thank you. But I've got to tell you this about the therapy, because I just found someone in the book type of thing, and they didn't really understand my world at all. Like, I just felt like I had to spend a lot of my sessions just explaining to the guy, you know, what it feels like to be an artist. And
exactly.
And then it all ended really horribly when he asked if he could, what did he say? Something like, and by people watching do not think this is normal for therapists. They do not normally do this. But he asked if he saw me on TV, if he'd be able to tell his friends that he knew me. He said he wouldn't tell them how he knew me, he just wouldn't. And I was just like, my whole world just felt like it was going to implode. Like, that is really not normal or okay for a therapist.
No, that's actually highly unprofessional and unethical.
That would get you struck off.
Yeah, and more importantly, what it did was it alienated you and took away from the interpersonal work that you were doing. And he was making some sort of vain attempt to connect with your celebrity status. And also, you know, we talked in the article about true self and false self, and how, you know, the public persona that a lot of artists have, and a lot of us, even myself, you know, my therapist persona is only a certain aspect of who I am, and there's all this other stuff that I am and you are. And as a therapist, we try and connect with people on a very, very personal level, on a real level, with someone's true self, and help them to develop maybe the hidden aspects of that as well.
Yeah, so I don't know what the deal was with this guy, but it just sent me running, and I never went back for, like I say, for like 10 years. But
that's a shame.
That is a shame, but when I eventually, you know, got to the point that I told in the story there, where I just got so bad that I needed help again, like this time I did it differently, and I went to a charity called BACP. Do you know BACP, which is...
Oh, yes, yeah. I'm actually a registered practitioner.
Performing Arts Medicine.
Yeah.
Oh, you're registered? Yeah, of course you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, British Association of Performing Arts Medicine, and they specialise in supporting performers and artists. And they referred me to a specialist who, like yourself, just had a bit more experience of this world. And that was huge. Like, I suddenly just felt like I didn't have to try and break down what being a performer means. I could just go straight into like being an artist and what it felt like, and just be myself. Because like an artist is a huge part of who I am, but it's not the whole of who I am.
Exactly.
So I'm really glad that happened. So big up to BAPAM. And if anyone's watching this who is any kind of creative or performer, you're entitled to their support. Like, they will help you. So if you're having a hard time, which I know so many people are right now, BAPAM, Google them. They will help you. They will give you some. They gave me some free support, and then they gave me some subsidized support. So I really recommend it.
And music support and Help Musicians UK are also great. In that same respect, music support will signpost you to therapists, and actually I've helped to create a roster of therapists that have some connection to the music industry, that can help people via music support, and it's working brilliantly.
That's great. So how do people find out about that music support?
Well, there's a website, there's a Facebook page. You can Google it and get the number and just call. Really, they have a helpline. They have safe tents at the festivals, and they can help you.
I think one thing I think is really important is like the one reason why I put off getting help for so long is because I often felt like my issues weren't bad enough, or they weren't legitimate, or that other people, you know, that's the kind of thing that other people deal with. I'm okay, really. Like, so I just want to help. I don't know if you have some words as well, but just to encourage people who might feel like their struggle is minor, but they're still having a hard time. Like, it's still worth getting some help, right?
Well, there was a really profound line in what you just did, and I jotted it down: isolated by shame of secret suffering. And that just hit me because, you know, it is about, you know, secrets. There's a saying in 12-step fellowship that secrets keep you sick. And, you know, my belief is that when we bring those secrets out, they die in the light and they grow in the dark. And shame is really a big part of why we keep ourselves hidden when we're struggling with difficult things, really. And those secrets, you know, they if they grow, they can grow, like you said, to really, you know, places where people are considering suicide. And, you know, you got to that place. And I believe that if you'd got the help earlier, then perhaps you wouldn't have gone so far.
Yeah. I've just seen a comment saying, can I increase the gain on my mic? So I'm just going to quickly do that.
Right.
Yeah, everyone who's watching, what's up? Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
1 million live streams over the last couple of months, haven't we? But hopefully this one's a little bit different. Is that clearer? Is that a bit better?
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll sound a bit better. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt what you were saying, man. Like,
no.
It's super important though, right? Like the shame is such a painful thing for so many people, and like it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are, and like especially right now when, like, for me, like, people always ask me, you know, how are you, and it's so instinctive to just say I'm fine or I'm good, when I'll be honest with you, right now it's not okay at the moment. Like, there's so much going wrong. Feels like grief news is a daily thing for me. Like every single day there seems to be some new loss or some new person who's, you know, now poorly, and we're not sure if they're going to make it. And it's like, I'm not okay. I'm doing all this stuff to help me get through it, but I'm also practicing the art of not being okay. Like just the art of being really down. Like, it's totally not shameful to say, I feel like shit. I feel so down. I'm suffering. I'm grumpy. I'm pissed off. Like, that's healthy human emotion, right?
Exactly. And it's the truth, isn't it? It's the human condition, the truth that we all share. You know, none of us feel great all the time. We all have difficult days. We all have days when we feel low. And especially in the current situation, you know, we're all suffering something that was completely unknown to us, unprecedented, you know, levels of different ways of life, you know, and just being in a different way with each other. And, you know, not being able to hug family and friends, you know, just simple things like that we often take for granted. And being able to be honest about that. Yeah, it's a killer. And being honest about that, you know, I was thinking, you know, going back to the secrecy thing, I was thinking of two words, you know, secrets and truth. And when we share our truth, you know, when we share our truth, we connect. And that can be the most powerful thing. And that's essentially what we're doing in therapy. You know, I encourage people to come into the therapy room and share their truth and get as honest as they feel comfortable to be. And most of my efforts are put into making sure that they feel safe and secure enough to be as honest as they can.
So how do you do that? Like, what happens if let's just imagine someone's watching this stream. You know, this is going out on Focusrite, it's going out on Novation, so there's lots of music makers there, lots of people who love music, make music, express themselves through music. That is, you know, it's no coincidence that a lot of those people also really struggle with self-esteem, really struggle with feeling worthy. Like, how could you describe to someone who's thinking, my mental health has been bad, I think I'm going to get some help, but I'm worried it will be hideously uncomfortable. Like, how do you make that comfortable for them?
Well,
firstly,
I think it's about the space. So it's really important that there is a safe space, and having to transition to doing all of my work online. I do a lot of work online with musicians who are on tour because it's a necessity. But having had to switch all of my work to online, I've had to talk to people about that. So I said to them, look, you know, make sure you're in a room where you won't be distracted, you won't be disturbed, you can't be overheard, and that you feel safe and secure enough to talk about whatever it is that you're going to need to talk about. So there is a certain importance in setting up a safe therapeutic environment, as we call it. And that's your starting point. And then the second element that's really important is the therapists themselves. So it's about finding the right therapist for you, finding someone who you feel you can work with. Don't just pick someone out of a list on the web and then just go with them. You know, have that initial consultation, take some time to reflect, and then maybe have 2 or 3 with some different therapists. But ideally, if you can, go with someone who's recommended, or going through a referral service. That often is the best way to do it. But for me, it's about really putting someone at ease and making them realize that although I'm the therapist and they're the client, we are just 2 people talking. And a lot of people, what I find, come to therapy with a problem, and they expect me to give them the solution so that they can apply the solution and then feel better. And what I say, yeah, that is the dream.
Fix me, doctor.
Yes, exactly. And what I say to them is that it's not like that. Everyone comes to therapy with a rucksack full of rocks. And what I do is I ask you to open the rucksack and start showing me the rocks. Now, some of these are going to be big, some of them are going to be small, some are going to be ones that you're very familiar with, and some you'll be like, oh, I haven't seen that one before. Some you'll be think you're familiar with, and then I'll say to you, oh, just have a look at the other side, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, I hadn't looked at it like that. And what I say to people is that you're not going to walk out of therapy without a bag or without any rocks, but what I can guarantee you is that you will walk out of therapy with a considerably lighter bag, and you will know exactly what rocks you've got left in there, because along the way you'll leave some of them with me in the therapy room. The ones that don't serve any purpose for you anymore, you'll be able to let go of. And that's the process of therapy, I believe.
I love that analogy, man, with the rocks. That's cool. And like, I think something that really helped me was like when I was in therapy, like the therapist was really gently suggesting lots of things that could help, like not saying I had to do it, but just saying, you know, this can help, that can help. And there's a few things that really resonated with me. Some of it didn't. But I did lots of reading, and I did lots of like creating a meditation practice, creating a yoga practice, and just creating a little bit of balance in my life so that it didn't all just revolve around these kind of endless loops or endless holes of seeking validation or seeking a way of feeling okay that just was never going to sustain itself.
Yeah. Well, I really like that phrase that you used, the hit of validation. Yeah. And it just really rings true for me. It is an addiction. Social media is one of the most problematic addictions on the rise at the moment. And, you know, the way you put it is perfect, because that hit of validation, even when people take drugs, sometimes it's about boosting the self-esteem. It's about feeling better. And we can get that from anything, be it food or sex or shopping or work. You know, that can anything can become an addiction, really, because it's not.
Like, go on, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, it's not really about the thing. It's not about the drugs or the alcohol or the social media. It's about the internal process. When we work with addictive disorders, that's what you're working on. You're working on the underlying process, and anything that has perhaps caused that, like for you, the traumatic experience when you were a child, you know, that was very significant in terms of a point of origination for your addictive behavior.
Yeah, that's it, man. And I feel like, especially in something like music, where like you get rewarded for being good. If you're good, then you'll get lots of social media validation, or you'll get lots of people streaming you, or you'll get this gig or that festival, and it becomes this constant like chase to get, and none of it's ever going to actually make you right if your pain's coming from here. And that like can become a bit of a sick system. I think that's what I struggled with for a long time, was I was just like, no, just I'll feel better once I've done this, and then I'll do this. And then I walked off the pyramid stage at Glastonbury, and I still didn't feel right. And I was like, fuck, I can't sustain this. I can't keep outdoing myself.
Yeah. And it is about the relationship that you have with it. There's another fellowship saying of 1 is too many and 1,000 is never enough. And if the pyramid stage isn't going to do it for you, then nothing is really, is it, as a musician? So it's kind of, you know, we say it's an inside job. You know, you have to do that inner therapeutic work in order to get better, because the outside stuff just doesn't fix us.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So I feel like we were going to have some questions. I don't know if is Simon going to jump back on and
Hello.
that was good. That
Hi,
was
Simon.
sick.
That's good, isn't it?
Love
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few things that people have said over the comments, and I'll get to them in a sec. But one of the things that I wanted to sort of maybe ask you about as well was what your sort of experiences are now. Sometimes I wonder whether those who might be lucky enough to sort of not necessarily suffer, day in, day out, or suffer as much perhaps, may hear stories or pieces of art, pieces of music, such as what you performed, and think that that is basically saying how you're fixed, quote unquote. And how you sort of feel like that works day to day. Might somebody get to the point where they're self-aware enough where they can sort of acknowledge that something's up and then they can address it, or whether it's an ongoing journey of seeking help and moving on like that?
I think like the biggest change in myself was becoming a bit more aware of how I was talking to myself. So I talk about it a bit in that piece where I'm like, oh, my mind decided to join in the attack. You are worthless. You are a piece of shit. And piece of beep. And I think like I hadn't noticed how awful my self-talk had got. And if someone else spoke to me in those ways, it would just be straight up abuse. I would end that relationship, never speak to that person again because they've got some issues. And like, but I think a lot of us don't notice what's happening in our heads. And I feel like that came out of a lot of meditation practice and a lot of therapy, where I could be like, I kind of gave my inner critic a name and a persona, and I started hanging out with him a little bit, which at first felt really mad. But then gradually I started to get to know him a bit and understand that really he wasn't this big scary demon monster. He was this scared little child, and he was me, 4 years old, frightened. And then actually it became less of a battle against that demon and more of a kind of nurturing, reassuring kind of voice, which now I am so much better with that self-talk. Like, so at the moment I'm in a really hard place with my mental health because I'm going through literal grief. Like I mentioned earlier, I've had losses, and so I'm in pain. But the one thing that's changed is that when I'm feeling awful, I'll look in the mirror and I'll say, it's okay, kiddo. Of course you're in pain. You care about these people. Rather than before, when I'd have been like, it's because you're not good enough, you piece of beep. Like, do you know what I mean? And that's huge. So that kind of awareness of what you're actually thinking, like aware of what's really going through your head, noticing it and not necessarily identifying with it, and allowing that to become all of you, and just saying, I hear you, it's okay, I love you, let's have a hug, like that. It sounds mad, but it really worked for me.
And how important was it for you to externalize that with your therapist in terms of getting it out?
Yeah, it was a big deal. Like, I could tell you the whole story if you like, but essentially, like, the therapist asked me to speak to this voice in my head, and I was like, "That's what crazy people do." And she was like, "Just try it. Ask it what he wants and what's his name." So I asked him, "What do you want and what's your name?" And he told me his name was Silver, and I was like, "This is I'm talking to myself." But this character Silver evolved. And at first, it was like my inner critic. But as I spent more time talking to this. I would say talking to, but I'm just imagining these conversations in my head. And this character Silver quickly changed from this kind of demon character into like a kind of older and wiser version of myself. It kind of turned into my own, like, my spirit, my kind of wisdom source. So now when I'm having a hard time, I actually turn into Silver, and I encourage myself. Like, I've stopped trying to get music to make me feel better, or alcohol to make me feel better, or other people, and I can do it for myself.
Yeah, and there's something that we're taught to do in terms of supporting the client to internalize the therapist. So the hope is that when a client finishes therapy, if they finish therapy, because some people do stay in therapy for quite a long time, or use it as a resource that keeps them stable. But hopefully over time, someone will internalize the therapist and develop their own inner therapist, rather than having that noisy inner critic. And the inner voice that you were talking about, we all have that. And sometimes, like we were saying earlier, on a good day, it can be, really encouraging and powerful and empowering. And then on a bad day, it can be really destructive.
That's one of the other things that somebody brought up on YouTube, is that there's no right answer of how are you feeling or how are you doing. And one of the things I remember somebody saying about grief, but I guess it's true of anything on this kind of spectrum, is asking somebody how are you doing today. Specifying the point in time, because there is no definitive feeling, over long periods of time.
And also taking the effort sometimes when people have that stock answer of, yeah, I'm cool, everything's fine. But you can kind of feel or tell that they're not, just saying, are you really okay? Just taking the effort, because if you just say, oh, great, and then walk off, or, and I think that happens a lot in our society. I think people just accept that answer from people, from their friends and their family, when they know that something's not right, or they can feel that something isn't right. And if we actually say, oh, hang on a minute, I hear what you're saying, but you seem a bit down, or are you really okay?
But you've got to be careful, right? Because sometimes that can be seen as a little bit like, I've just said I'm okay. Can you just back the fuck off? Like,
yeah, that's true. And even as a therapist, when I go towards things with people and I can feel that they really don't want to get there, then you have to do the respectful thing and back off. But at the same time, not inquiring sometimes leave people being unheard.
Do you know what? Because I get asked this quite a lot. I've done quite a lot of like panels about mental health now, and since I started talking about it, I've done quite a lot of stuff around it. And I get asked a lot, like, how should we approach someone who we're worrying about their mental health? And I've always thought, from my point of view, I'd much rather they didn't say, "Are you okay? Are you really okay?" I'd much rather, right, that they could be vulnerable to me. They could trust me enough to tell me what's really happening with them. And maybe they say, I'm having a hard time with my mental health, or whatever it is. And that way, that makes me feel respected. It makes me feel trusted. And it makes me feel like if they're okay to talk about it, then I'm definitely safe to talk about it to you. So I feel like sometimes it's more helpful just to be open rather than be
prodding people. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd agree with that 100%. But what you're talking about there is culture. You're talking about, destigmatizing, difficulties with mental health. In this country, a lot of the time it's, you only go and see a therapist if you're really in a mess, and if something's got really, really bad and it's a crisis point. And that's the way we look at things, and we need to change that. And I hope that what we're doing here is part of that, because it's about people feeling comfortable and safe enough. And I'm in the process of actually launching a health and wellbeing service where we're hinged upon this idea that if people have regular health and well-being checkups, which we call them sort of like MOTs, then you can catch things, you can catch small issues before they become really bad problems. And I think if everybody was having like a health and well-being MOT every 3 months or 6 months or a year, then then we'd start talking about it, and it would become the norm. It would become something that people aren't afraid to be open about. So when you do ask someone, well, how are you really feeling? They'll be like, oh, okay, well, actually, I'm glad you asked, because they feel comfortable enough to do so. But at the moment, I think people are a bit frightened.
It's the interesting thing, isn't it? I remember when you wrote the article for Novation, Shlomo, and I think part of that was talking about, if you're talking about it, then other people may well feel confident to sort of speak up about their issues as well. And I actually gave it a test, and I just on my Instagram, I'd never really spoken to anybody about it before. Talked a little bit about panic attacks, and did so over a sort of a few stories or whatever, and just off of the back of that, I had people messaging me, just telling me about their experiences with panic attacks, and I wouldn't have had those conversations otherwise, because why would I have spoken about mine? Why would they have spoken about theirs?
Well done for doing that, man. That's a brave thing to do.
Yeah, it's great.
You've made the world a slightly safer place by doing that, for sure.
And that's the premise under which all the 12-step fellowships work. If you go to a 12-step meeting, then there's people telling their story, over and over and over again. You know, different people will tell their story and the whole meeting listens to it. And it's through that identification, even in group therapy, in treatment centers, it's through identification that people feel empowered and safe enough to be open themselves when they haven't been before. And it takes people like yourself to do those things and take that first step. If we take that first step with courage, we can open the door for so many other people.
Because even if it's that first step to seeking out some therapy, it may well be that if somebody starts talking about it, somebody else might not feel that they want to approach that person or to publicly talk about it. But I know some of the problems that a lot of people will experience is not wanting to burden others with, like you were saying, Shlomo, with problems that they deemed to be small or insignificant. And I think that's probably where professional therapy comes in handy, because you don't necessarily have to worry about that burden.
Yes, exactly. There's a clear transaction. There's a clear kind of professional client relationship, which is about one person having the skill and the expertise to support someone through something difficult. And I would say that if something is making you feel something, then it isn't a small problem, or it isn't insignificant. You know, if you're feeling a way about something, then it is important to you, and it's worth talking to someone about it.
For sure.
One of the other questions that we had over Facebook was, and this is quite specific, but I don't see any reason why we can't ask it. Do you have any? Probably one for Chula, I would imagine. But do you have any suggested reading for partners of people suffering with episodic depression?
Oh wow, there's loads of stuff out there. Nothing comes straight to mind, and I wouldn't want to get it wrong. But I do have lists and lists of books and things that people can read. But what I would say is that if you talk to a professional, then you'll get the right guidance on the specific books to read that are relevant to your issue, and there's a depth to that. So if I was just to throw out a random book now, it may not necessarily be the right book for that person, but I do have a list of that stuff. So if anyone wants to contact me and ask me any specific questions, they're welcome to, and I can help them with that.
So
how
just
do we do that, Chula? How do we contact you?
You can go straight onto my website, which is CM Therapy, www.cmtherapy.co.uk. That's there, and my contact details are there.
But yeah, I mean, but presumably you would then be. Would you say that you're an advocate for people seeking therapy who aren't necessarily having those feelings directly, but are a partner of, or a family member of somebody who is having the more direct issues?
Absolutely, and I work with lots of families of addicts or people who suffer from addictive disorders, and the family members are often just as affected by the individual's addiction, and we look at it as a systemic illness that needs to be treated in that way. So yeah, absolutely, you know, it needn't be. Sometimes it needn't be your problem specifically that is causing the issue for you. It could be someone else that's struggling in your life, that's causing you
that
difficulty.
Is trauma, isn't it? Like caring for someone else having a hard time is traumatic, and that you know, that you need help with trauma, you need support. Yeah,
absolutely.
And then somebody else on the YouTube there is saying that obviously thanks very much, Shlomo, good for you for writing songs and for completing your album, and that they've express themselves by writing a book talking about their inner feelings. How do you feel about I suppose the arts, music and the wider arts can obviously be a great help and great therapy in itself, but it can also be a cause to some degree of well, certainly there were for you, a cause of the issue as well. How do you sort of like sit with cause versus you know, sort of helping?
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because and a lot of people, I've spent a lot of time talking to others and myself about this kind of question, which is, are we traumatized because we're artists? Like, You know, were we born with a tendency to be creative and that's traumatic, or is it that we are creative because of the trauma? Do you know what I mean? It's like chicken and egg, but a lot of people, including myself, find it so helpful to be able to have a space where you can be really, really true. Even for me, even more than a therapy situation, because a therapy situation, I still haven't ever really been in a situation where I've to let everything out. Like, I don't think that would even be safe. I think that you always have some kind of self-protection. But in your own creative space, you can be so... Because you can be metaphorical if you want, or you can draw a picture, or you can write a song. It doesn't have to be so direct, and therefore you can put everything you're feeling into it, and that is so healthy. Like, that is gorgeous. So I'm always trying to encourage people to do free writing or writing in a journal, especially just when you've woken up. If you write down your dreams or write down anything that just comes out of your head without judging it, sometimes it will be drivel, but a lot of the time that's how I've written a lot of my album and my new album that I'm working on now. Like, it just comes out. And that's really healthy. But yeah, like you say, then there's the other side of it, which is the sharing process.
Yes.
That is the part that is so hard and such a minefield, and that young artists are not getting the support they need or the training they need to separate their true self from their artistic self and not depend on success to feel okay. And that took me so long to get right, and I'm still struggling with it now. I'm struggling with it as we speak. Like, it's hard. It's a struggle. If you want to be an artist, it's going to be a struggle.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I would definitely support the creative process as being cathartic for, you know, people's trauma. You know, in and of itself, I think it can be an amazing thing, but it is that exposure that then leads people to a place of vulnerability. And, you know, if you're the more popular you are, the greater that vulnerability. And like your experience, there will always be people waiting to bully you and put you down. And
always the haters.
Yeah, always. And so you have to be, I think, robust enough if you're going to bare your soul to be able to take that and do it with the expectation that it's highly likely something like that will happen.
But also, like, you've got to understand, like, if it's not for you, right? If that happens and you don't like how it feels, it's okay. You don't have to be the next big thing. You can just express yourself for yourself or for the people who you trust.
Exactly.
You don't have, a lot of my problems was just constantly either comparing myself to other artists or comparing myself to my own self, either my own previous experience and successes or my own projected. Like, I feel like a lot of it, like, I'm doing this show for kids at the moment. Every Thursday, I'm doing this live stream for kids, trying to get families to beatbox and express themselves. And I'm just trying to drill this home over and over again. I'm not actually bothered how good it is, what you're doing. All I'm bothered about is that you express yourself, let your soul out, like, just get it out. And
enjoy
I just wasted so much of my life worrying about if what I was doing was good enough. And what that really meant is worrying about whether I was good enough. Yeah. And that's such a shame. I'm still not over that. I'm still grieving that loss of spending so much of my life comparing myself to these, like, non-existent things. I'm me. I'm not some other artist. Yeah. So it's hard.
Well, I had a really interesting experience when I went to music college when I first got clean, and they auditioned something like 40 drummers, and they were only choosing 5. There were like 5 drummers, 5 bassists, 5 guitarists. Gosh, and I went in and I managed to get in, and I went there, and all these drummers were like, 100 miles an hour, like, and I watched them and I was like, oh my God, I'm rubbish. I'm awful.
You're a drummer.
Yeah. Same. And I was like, what? Yeah, I know. And I was like, why am I here? These guys are just amazing. Why have they picked me? Yeah. And then what I found was that it was my musicality, because I played in orchestras for a long time and played guitar for a while as well. When we were forming bands within the group, people wanted me as their drummer because I didn't overplay. Partly because I couldn't, but also because musicality was more important than these flash techniques, and then my self-esteem kind of came up, and I realized, okay, hang on a minute, that was just my warped perception. There's a part of me that's always ready to put myself down rather than boost myself up. And that's something that I, have to work on every day.
Yeah, but even those people who you think of as being right at the top, or the people that we think we should be better to be like, trust me, man, they're having the same imposter feelings that you are. They're feeling they're feeling it too, because they're creative. They're probably overcompensating or having ego problems. Like it's just normal. It's human.
The human condition.
The more we talk about it.
I saw a fantastic meme the other day, which was it wasn't music specific. It was just a generic meme, which was, and it was literally just words that said, "Don't worry about it. Nobody else knows what they're doing in it either," which I thought was fantastic. So I think that we're sort of coming to the end of it now. It was quick. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I do have one more very quick, well, maybe not so quick, but a quick question. What I did want to say to everybody watching and listening is that some of the institutions, some of the contact details and things like that that we've spoken about during the webinar, I do have a slide that we'll put up just at the end. And we'll leave that up for a few minutes just so that you can note down some of the contact details and some of the phone numbers as well for some of the institutions that have been mentioned, should you wish to seek help or even just to talk to somebody. So that will come when we've stopped talking now. One of my colleagues at Focusrite had just a real quick question. We haven't really spoken about the specific situation that, well, most of the world find itself in at the moment, and wondered whether there is, either of you had some, again, as quick as you want, but as some any advice that you've got for the situation that we're in now. People will, no doubt, be experiencing some anxiety and some issues with being, kept at home and feeling isolated and things like that. And again, that feeling of, oh well, I shouldn't be feeling like this because I might have it much better than somebody else who might be in a worse position. What do either of you sort of have any advice or thoughts on that?
Get some therapy. Yeah. I mean, it's a global trauma and we're all experiencing it to different degrees and in different ways. And I don't think there's anybody who's really going through this completely unscathed. It throws up a lot of existential questions for us all, and a lot of lifestyle questions as well. And the good thing is that there's loads of help out there. There's loads of free counselling and therapy services. And what I would say as well is that communicate with the people who are around you. Be as honest as you're able to be with the people who you're with, and let them know what's going on for you and how you're feeling. But also, I think it's really important to have something that's external to that. And what I found with my clients is that at the beginning, some of them were a little bit unsure about doing everything online. And, they were like, oh, I haven't got much to talk about because I'm just stuck in the house with my family. But then as time wore on and the tensions perhaps rose at home and difficulties started to show themselves, they started saying to me, oh, I'm really glad I kept on my therapy, because a few people did drop out at the beginning of the lockdown, but quite nearly all of them now are saying, I'm so glad I've got this outlet. I'm so glad I've got you to talk to and to be a mirror for what's going on for me, because I walk away with so much insight afterwards. And I can go back to my family and go back to being self-isolating and in lockdown with a much clearer head. So that's what I would recommend. Absolutely.
Yeah, man, I'd echo all of that, man. Like, get help. Like, you don't have to be at death's door with depression or mental health to go and get some help, and it doesn't have to cost the world, and it doesn't have to be super painful. And even if get help just means ask a friend to listen to you for a bit, or ask your partner if they can watch the kids for a bit longer so you can have a rest, or whatever it is. Just be honest about what's really happening and what your needs are. It's hard. It's not as easy as like, oh, I'll just be honest then, but like, take some baby steps towards looking after yourself. I'm still struggling, so I find it hard to answer that question. I don't know the answer. I'm having such a hard time here, but I'm happy to talk about it at least.
The other thing I recommend to people is one act of self-care every day. So something that, and it's about the deliberation of that. So consciously saying to yourself, okay, my act of self-care today is I'm going to run a bath and put loads of, bubbles in it with some, or I'm going to make myself a really nice meal. But it's not that you don't normally do these things, but it's about the conscious process of I'm doing this to take care of myself. And it can be as simple as going for a walk or reading a book or whatever it is that people like to do. But it's not about the thing. Again, it's about the focus of self-care. One thing every day.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much for your time.
Thanks for having us, man.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Like I say to everybody, we will have some contact details for some of the institutions and initiatives that's been spoken about just at the end here. So it just leaves me to thank you. Thank you very much to Shlo, and thank you very much to Chula. Stay safe, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Simon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.